Talking about the weekend. We had a great time. We love America. You love America. You celebrated. We celebrated. That's the way it's supposed to be. And yet not everybody was really feeling it, so to speak. There were some folks out there, some news organizations, members of Congress, pundits, etc., that had issues. Let's just start with one here, Clay. 204. This is from NPR. Have we crushed their podcast yet, by the way? Because that's a thing that we have to do.
We definitely need to crush their podcast because of this ridiculousness. If you love America, as we continue to celebrate July 5th, you should be subscribing to the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton show and help us kick NPR's ass.
And let me just say, if you had any possible qualms about, you're like, oh, but NPR, I love when they talk about how to make the best summer salads or whatever. This is the kind of stuff that NPR puts out over our, for many, their favorite American holiday, right? And, I mean, some people go Thanksgiving, and I don't want to split our Thanksgiving peeps from our 4th of July folks. They're both great holidays, great things going on. Clay, you don't have an opinion on this one, right? You love them both. You love both of your holidays equally.
I try not to make a choice, but I will tell you this, Buck, as you get ready to read, I find myself, and I bet a lot of our listeners do too, wanting to be more pro-America than even I was before for the people who I feel like are anti-American. Does that make sense? I feel even stronger that I want to wear the most ridiculous pro-America gear imaginable on the 4th and on the 4th weekend.
I absolutely agree. 240 years ago today, NPR tweeted, leaders representing 13 British colonies signed a document to declare independence. It says that all men are created equal, but women, enslaved people, indigenous people, and many others were not held as equal at the time. Okay, NPR. We know that.
We have studied history.
We are aware of this. This is the part of it. They go, oh, we're just trying to tell the history. It's like, if you got a friend named Bob who maybe drinks a little bit too much, maybe don't show up on Bob's birthday and be like, I know we're supposed to celebrate today, but you're actually an alcoholic who's messed up your life, right? Like there are limits here, I think, to time and place that we should all understand. And in case that one, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it's the best man and best, maid of honor speech. You don't air the dirty laundry in the best man and the maid of honor speech. You don't be like, well, remember when they broke up for 2 months because we went to Vegas and Johnny over here made the mistake of hooking up with a cocktail waitress and then it got back. That might have happened and it might be an incredibly awkward part, but you don't share it during the toast.
Otherwise, your best man has to stand up and say, I think what my friend here is trying to say is that love is blind.
Yeah, that's right.
What ends
Which
up
is an
happening.
amazing line. Yes. And as we come back, Cori Bush had one of the worst tweets of all, Buck, and you're going to hit that congresswoman making $175,000.
Welcome back to the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show. I'm Buck. Happy July 5th. I hope you enjoyed your 4th of July weekend, Independence Day weekend. The number here, we're going to take some reactions to a pretty straightforward question that Clay posed, an important question, which is, do you feel like you should be even more outward in your patriotism, given that patriotism, shows of it, at least, are under assault from the left? It's very obvious that that's happening. I mean, we have plenty of proof, of evidence, of instances to point to. We mentioned before members of Congress. I mean, here's one. This is on 4th of July weekend. Cori Bush, member of Congress, writes, when they say that the 4th of July is about American freedom, remember this, the freedom they're referring to is for white people. This land is stolen land, and black people still aren't free. Clay, there's a lot that I would like to say about this, and I know you would too, but I think we should just start with the top line here. First of all, to refer to freedom in the present tense as freedom only for white people, she says they're referring to freedom for white people. This is stunningly not just divisive, but it's also just a dumb thing to say. I'm sorry. It's just a wrong and nasty thing to inject into American society on Independence Day weekend.
It's also, as you mentioned, wildly historically inaccurate. And to me, for a congresswoman to be putting that out, and I feel like we talked about this some, Buck, are we playing into the hands of stupid people by giving them attention? Because the reality is this is a congresswoman that neither you nor I would be paying attention to. Otherwise, our audience wouldn't be exposed to her. But look, she makes $175,000 a year as a congresswoman. She is directly profiting off of our tax dollars. That is the exact opposite of a lack of freedom. She is so free that she can be elected to the highest body in the land, in the House of Representatives, the member of our Congress, and she has the privilege to be able to rip a country in a way that truly unfree countries would never allow, right? You can't do this in China. You can't do this in Iran. You can't do this in North Korea. You can't do it in the vast majority, I would say, of countries in the world. But the historical inaccuracy of it, to your point earlier, and we were making the analogy of if you're doing a best man or the maid of honor speech, our democracy was imperfect at its founding. But the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson seeded a full fruition of democracy in that document itself. Has America always lived up perfectly to the ideals of the Declaration of Independence? No, but we have become a more perfect union every day, every week, and every month, I would say, basically, since July 4th, 1776, which we celebrated yesterday and continue to celebrate with a holiday today. So it's just so transparently troll-worthy, but also historically inaccurate that it disgusts me.
And I would add that we celebrate the principles of the founding, not the belief in a perfection. No, that's actually that's not something that is out there. No one holds that we were a perfect country in 1776, nor are we a perfect country today. So there's the creation of a massive straw man by the left here, the creation of an argument that does not really exist, that's not being said, which reminds me of what's being said about CRT now as well. If you oppose CRT, you oppose the teaching of the history of this country that involves slavery and involves the mistreatment of Native Americans. You know, that's just not true. That's not the argument. The argument is, should we be teaching racial Marxism to kids in school? By the way, the biggest teachers union in the country, it came out over the weekend, is pushing explicitly for that now. We'll come to that one later. But I just wanted that to get on everyone's radar that this is now that the CRT battle, there's a reason why they didn't want people paying attention, because it's a central issue for the left. But Clay, there was a piece in the New York Times that you and I were texting about over the weekend, a 4th of July symbol of unity that may no longer unite. We're not talking about Uncle Sam costumes with red, white, and blue pants. We're not talking about, top hats with the flag pattern on them. The flag itself, in this New York Times piece, they bring up, and they did fortunately get trounced for this, as they should. But let me just a little bit of this piece for everyone to hear. The American flag flies in paint on the south side of Peter Triber's potato truck, a local landmark parked permanently on County Route 48 in Long Island. He thought he was drawing attention to his family's farm until he tried to sell his produce at a local green market where he sells things like bergamot, honey, and sunflowers. He had trouble striking deals until he said he let his liberal leanings slip out in conversation with a customer. She said, oh, phew, I wasn't so sure about you. I thought you were some flag-waving something or other. End quote. Can we just be very clear? And they go through more examples of this. There are now, if you're an MSNBC wearing, triple masked, critical race theory loving, climate change is going to murder us all in 5 years leftist, you are triggered by the American flag. That's where we are as a country now.
And it's a disgrace, I think, that we have managed to get here. And when I read this piece we were texting about over the weekend in the New York Times, Buck, saying that basically the American flag has been considered by a certain group of left-wingers, which I think is fairly substantial, 25-30% of people that I think genuinely hate America. I also read this, Buck. Remember when the New York Times had their editorial? She went on MSNBC and she said she was really upset on Memorial Day because she went out to Long Island and she saw all the flags and it made her think, oh my God, there's a lot of Trump supporters out here in Long Island. I read this piece as basically a defense of her being triggered by the flag being waved proudly. And to be honest with you, Buck, my response there, and I'm coming out of, by the way, going to the Atlanta Braves baseball game on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which was bathed in patriotism and United States flags. But I'm more likely now to wear American flag gear and to support America on July 4th in as patriotic of a method and fervor as I possibly could. And I bet there's a lot of people responding to this America hate by doubling down on America love, right? It's crazy that we're in this position.
And you and I both know that when you see a home anywhere in America right now that proudly displays an American flag out front, here's what you know. That home, without seeing anything about who lives inside or who they are, they're not going to subscribe to the America's an awful country rhetoric we're hearing. They're not going to be super woke. They're not going to be super left. And so what you find is that increasingly fashionable anti-Americanism is entirely a symptom, a problem of the Democrat Party and the left. And they can't really hide from this now. Find me one Republican of prominent substance with a following over Independence Day weekend. One conservative, doesn't even have to be a GOP specific thing, who's saying American flags make me uncomfortable. I don't like it's because of our history of genocide and oppression and all the rest of it. You won't. This only exists on the left.
And this is why the historian in me, and I say historian in quotation marks, I was a history major, but I am a history nerd, as we've talked about on this show already. I was reading an interesting study, Buck. Do you know what percentage? There is an obsession with slavery in America that I don't think really exists anywhere else in the world on the degree and to the degree it does in America right now, as if the entire American experience is only defined by slavery. I thought this was interesting. Do you know what percentage of slaves, Buck, that came from Africa and became enslaved around the world actually ended up in the United States of America? Like, I found this to be really fascinating. What percentage of African slaves who were brought to a country or to a part of the world, what percentage of them ended up in America? Do you have any idea?
I know it would be an estimate, and I know what percentage of Southerners pre-secession actually owned slaves, because I think that's one thing that people don't tend to know either.
By the way, that's like 2%.
That's right, 2%. Yeah.
1 in 50 Southerners had slaves.
So what's the estimate globally?
4% of all of the African slave trade ended up in the United States. Yet I bet the way that it's covered, a huge percentage of our audience is like almost all of those slaves ended up in America, 4%.
If you asked a school age, and I mean somebody who's, let's say, junior high school age, why did America fight its first foreign war? I can almost guarantee that less than 1%, and I'm talking about kids that, do all their homework and are squared away, less than 1% of them would be able to tell you, we fought our first foreign war because of the enslavement of Americans by North African, Berber, Muslim pirates. Very few people know that. Why did we go to the shores of Tripoli? And there's a whole conversation here about the hundreds of years of what was effectively the white slave trade by North African states, which I bring this up and people say, that's not. They went as far as Iceland and Ireland, grabbing slaves off the coast and then selling them into slavery we could talk about all over the world slavery practices. So
every single person, Buck, sorry to cut you off, but every single person in their history has slavery in their history. Every single one of them. And yet we focus on the 80 years from 1783 to 1863 when slavery was legal in the United States as if it's the sum total of slavery around the world.